The Capitals fall in the first game of the preseason, and Trevor van Riemsdyk leaves the game with an injury. Should we be concerned? I'll discuss next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, including the SiriusXM app and on YouTube. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. My name is Dan Holme. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And the best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. The Capital season is going, and I would love to talk Caps hockey with you one-on-one, and we can do that on subtext. Just check the show description for more details. In today's episode of Locked On Capitals, we talk about what didn't work for the Capitals. We'll talk about how penalties and misplays ultimately led to the Capitals losing. A little bit later, we will talk about what did work. There was some great goal scoring out there. And ultimately, I believe that the Capitals could have ran away with this game if it wasn't for some untimely penalties and mismanagement. And also Hunter Shepard dialing in a really great game. But just to get it going here, we will talk about the potential injury to Trevor van Riemsdyk. And this is one of the things, and if you're an everydayer of the show, you know, I've spoke about this for the longest time. As I said, well, the blue line is good, and they have Alexiev, they have Vincent Iorio, they have Joel Edmondson. Where are they all going to fit? As it turns out, a Caps blue liner went down in the first game of the preseason. Am I saying he's going to miss a substantial amount of time? I don't know that, but I do know that he left the ice in pain, wasn't able to grip his stick. And Spencer Carbery also talked about his concerns about this as well. He said that anytime a starting veteran player on the team, you know, a guy that it really contributes and is a vital part of the team goes out, there's cause for concern. You know, it's not as easy as, you know, just plug and play. Well, you know, TVR's out. We'll just plug in one of these rookies and it'll just be flawless, right? Well, as it turned out in this game, Vinny Iorio, who is the future on the Caps blue line, did step in and played admirably. So if it appears that he is going to miss some time, TVR that is, there are options out there. It's not optimal. Listen, the Capitals took care of a lot of concerns on the blue line. If we just remember talking about this last season, that John Carlson is the only guy on the blue line under contract. What are they going to do? What did they do? They ended up giving new contracts to TVR, Jensen, Faravari. Sandin's on the team now. So they did rectify the situation, and they do have that depth if they need that. Alexiev, Iorio. So in the unfortunate event that TVR is going to miss any kind of time, and, you know, I really hate that I'm talking about this in the first game of the preseason, which, you know, I'm going to go ahead and say it doesn't mean a whole lot. These games are about assessing talent. It's not about the win and the loss. And to be honest with you, I'm not even upset that they lost the game. Again, to reiterate, these games, especially the first couple, are about assessing talent. What works, what didn't, looking at the game film and growing from it. But the cause for concern for me on this game is not that they lost, but they potentially could have lost one of their key blue liners in Trevor van Riemsdyk. It is a bit concerning, and if you watch the game, it happened real quick, and it wasn't something that jumped out me right away in any event. TVR got hit in the right arm, hand, and went down the tunnel after coming off the ice. Before leaving the game, though, the 32-year-old led all Capitals skaters in ice time. He skated a total of 30 minutes on Sunday and managed an assist, 2 shots, and 2 blocks. He was also serving as the alternate captain. Again, so he plays a big role, led a lot of time, 18:30 on the ice. You're not going to necessarily get that amount of time. And even if you do get that amount of time from a rookie, chances are it's not going to be as great as what TVR brings to the table. So I'm just going to go ahead and say it as a guy that covers this team and as a fan of the team that I'm a bit concerned. I'm not going to push the panic button right away, but it is a bit concerning, all things considered. Like I said, Vincent Iorio ended up stepping up to make up for the veteran Blue Liners' absence, led Washington with 36 minutes in the defeat. So it was unfortunate that it happened. But, injuries are a part of the game. It is what happens, and it's about the depth on your team. You even are starting to see this in the NFL. The starting quarterback goes down. The team's done because, they didn't have a good backup quarterback. Well, the same thing goes in hockey. If you have viable options at your disposal, it's not all doom and gloom. And I do think for the Capitals that they do have viable options in Alexiev and Iorio and potentially Lucas Johansson, something like that. So that if someone does go out, I hate to talk about this because this team was so besieged with injuries last year that here we go again with the injury thing, that I hope that this is not a harbinger of things to come here. But in any event, that is what happened. But Carbery, on his concerns with TVR, he said there's definitely a concern, but he'll be evaluated tomorrow. And then we'll find out. I don't have any indication that it's bad. Just anytime a veteran player leaves the game, as a coach, it's not great. And, ultimately, this is Carbery's first season with the Caps. This is his first foray into being a head coach in the NHL. He wants to have all the weapons at his disposal so he can push the buttons when they need to get pushed. Carbery added that he'd be concerned anytime a veteran player leaves the game and doesn't return, but it was clear that there's concern for TVR. He didn't put up his hand back on his stick. Let me underline that he did not put his hand back on his stick for the rest of the shift after the contact occurred. Again, if you're an everydayer, make sure and follow Locked On Capitals, because tomorrow, as we find out, that will be a topic of conversation. But as of right now, that is what we know, that he left the game and that Vinny Iorio stepped up and played some big minutes in his absence. And kudos goes out to Iorio. I do believe that he is going to be the future of the Caps blue line. Not going quite the way that I had it pictured, though. I would like TVR, who is, I'm going to go ahead and say a couple steps at least above Iorio in my estimation, that TVR would be there instead of Vincent Iorio. I hope that Vinny gets his opportunity, but not this way, not so early. Again, this is the first game of the preseason. Let's not this be the way that this team goes. But in any event, that is what we know right now, is that TVR left the game. What does that ultimately mean going forward? We'll find out tomorrow. All right, so coming up here after the break, we will talk about what worked. I know the Capitals lost, but it wasn't all doom and gloom. What worked for this team? I'll talk about that coming up. You need one certainty in life, and that is why you need Jace Medical. The Jace case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. All it takes to get a Jace case is fill out a simple online form, and in some cases, jump on a quick call with one of our board-certified physicians. Get ongoing care from our physicians on any treatment-related question. Doctor created, doctor recommended. Listen, there are a lot of uncertainties in life. I've had a lot of uncertainties in life as far as health is concerned with my dad and my family members over the years. If you can have one certainty, if you can have health and medical care, then that is why you need Jace Medical for that certainty in life. So get $20 off these life-saving antibiotics today from Jace Medical by using my code LOCKEDON at checkout on jacemedical.com. That's JASE Medical.com. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure and subscribe or follow Locked On Capitals wherever you find your podcasts and on YouTube. The hockey season is here, and I've got you guys covered, so subscribe or follow Locked On Capitals today. All right, in this next segment here, we are going to talk about what worked. I know if you look at the box score, you're going to see that the Capitals lost in the shootout. It must not have got, according to script, to reiterate what I talked about off in the first segment there is these games are not about wins and losses. And I know what everyone says. It's always about wins and losses. Not the case in the preseason. What it is about assessment and what went right and what went wrong. And just taking a look at the game a little bit closer here. Today's game was scheduled to have a shootout no matter what, but the Capitals and Sabres games were tied 3-3 after OT. So they needed one anyway. And isn't that interesting how everything turns out? I like the penalty kill, said Coach Spencer Carbery. Goaltender Hunter Shepard was outstanding. I liked the last half of the third period. We go down in the third, and we were on our heels, obviously trying to protect the lead in the third period there. And one of the real bright spots for me out there was Hunter Shepard. And, if you're an everyday of the show, I've talked about how I think that he could potentially be a viable option as a backup netminder for the Capitals. It wasn't the case. Ultimately, he did get a new deal down in Hershey, but Hunter Shepard, 18 for 18, and Clay Stevenson did not have as great of a performance. He saved 6 of 9. So ultimately, again, I don't want to say that it was a bad outing for Clay Stevenson. I'm going to go ahead and say that it was a better outing for Hunter Shepard. But baby steps and growing things. This is Clay Stevenson's first forays into the NHL, and getting some real world experience in the NHL always helps. And I thought we controlled play. We went down in the game and we dug ourselves out just to get that thing tied. And I thought we controlled play for probably 9 minutes and we're pressing to win that game in regulation. And who really stood out for me was Sonny Milano. Again, signing him last season during the season is paying dividends. He played big out there and was noticeable. And, this game could have gone a lot of different ways. If you take a look out there, Protas could have won the game towards the end there, but ultimately that wasn't the case. Scoring less than a minute later, the Caps took the lead on an offensive zone sequence from the left point. Lucas Johansson put the puck on net. The shot was blocked and the puck bounced to the Caps center, Riley Sutter, who quickly bumped it to the slot for Milano and Aube-Kubel, who staked the Caps to a 1-0 lead at 14:52. Some great goal scoring out there. And you're getting it. Like I said, this was a rookie game for the most part. There were a fair amount of veterans as well, but it was, it was a pretty good percentage out there, shall we say, that was rookies out there. Midway through the second, the Caps doubled their lead with a forechecking goal just 14 seconds after a draw at the red line. The Caps put some forechecking heat on the Sabres behind the Buffalo net, leading to Henry Rabinski shot from the slot. Buffalo goaltender Eric Comrie stopped that one, but he couldn't stop Hofer's backhander on the rebound. So getting some goal scoring from some rookies out there, this is what we like to see. That is what these games are all about, is assessing talent. We know for the most part what we have in Dylan Strome. We know what we have for the most part with Anthony Mantha, Milano and Aube-Kubel, Sonny Milano, that kind of thing. But it's seeing how these different players work together. On Thursday, you will see how the next batch of Capitals players play against the Detroit Red Wings. And, as this goes along, it's going to be more veterans as players, get reassigned to their respective camps or whatever the case may be. But so that was some of the good things. Is some great goal scoring out there. There was some great goal scoring by, members of the team, the veterans, but also with some of the rookies as well. The Caps rallied on a well-placed shot from Milano at 12:31 after taking a feed from line mate Anthony Mantha at the Buffalo line. Milano fired a laser on a shot to the top right corner to beat veteran journeyman Dustin Tokarski. And it was a good moment for me to go and see Anthony Mantha out there. I got to say that I am really pulling for Anthony Mantha to have a great season. As we know that he struggled last season. He hired that mental coach and he was a healthy scratch and had all sorts of issues. On the day, though, he had 1 assist. So, not a great game. I ultimately would have liked to see him scoring a goal. Of course, it didn't turn out to be that way. But I am really pulling for Anthony Mantha. And that's what I'm taking from this game, is the contributions from the veterans, from the rookies, all working together And it was quite a game out there. And again, one of the highlights out there was having Sonny Milano out there just killing it out there and ultimately proving to everyone why he was a good acquisition. Milano on his scoring was coming on me, so I ripped it under his stick, said Milano. I didn't really aim, just tried to get it on the net, and it went in. And that's what it was all about, not thinking about it. And that's one of the things that really has always struck me about Milano is he's just naturally a great hockey player. He doesn't overthink things. Things come to him, almost like second nature, like he's played hockey his whole life and this is just doing another thing. He really stood out for me. Talking about Carbery on the result, he said, I liked a lot of things when I look back. There were instances I felt like for every line, Sonny Milano makes a big play. We also had some struggle shifts in the defensive zone. And then we had a really good sequence with LaPierre, Sutter. I would also like to give a lot of credit. He's a big part of the penalty kill, and he was outstanding on draws today. Dylan Strome, who had the identical face-off numbers to Sutter's. I like Strome's game tonight. So all things considered, it's some great play out there. We saw Sonny Milano play great, and also out there, Dylan Strome. So it's good to see them blending together. What rookies are going to end up making the big team? It's a little bit too early to tell as this was the first preseason game, but all things considered, I don't look at this game as a bad thing. I ultimately think that they did rather well, and it's all building blocks. Taking a look at net minding, Shepard was sharp in net, stopping all 18 shots he faced before leaving the game. 6 of Shepard's stops came while the Sabres were on the power play. That's where you really put to the test, and Hunter Shepard rose to the challenge, and Shep Dog does it again in the back of the net. Shepard made one of his best stops, denying Tyson Jost from in tight after a giveaway behind Washington net. So one of the things that I do know for sure, is that in some unforeseen circumstance, say that there's an injury, Darcy Kemper gets injured, or Charlie Lindgren gets injured, that they do have a viable option down in Hershey. We did see Hunter Shepard on the big team last year. He was on the roster, shall we say. But, I would like to see him get some more playing time and see what he has in the tank. Oftentimes you see how a player plays down in Hershey. It doesn't always translate to the big team, but for me, and I understand there were quite a bit of rookies out there for the Sabres as well, but all things considered, Hunter Shepard played a really great game. Again, I don't want to say anything disparaging about Clay Stevenson. He's a young guy. He's working on his game, but I'm obviously going to say that Hunter Shepard had a better game and building blocks going forward. All right, so coming up here after the break, we talked about what worked. We talked about how great Sonny Milano was. We talked about how great Hunter Shepard was. What didn't work? We'll talk about that next. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is easy and super easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options that include spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. And even if you're not that into betting, you could bet on an upcoming Commanders game. It makes watching the games that much more exciting. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So in this segment here, we are going to talk about the things that needed to get worked on. Again, this is the first game, the first preseason game. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I know there's already going to be people on Twitter going, this team's going to suck. They lost their first game. Again, to reiterate, to bring it back to the first segment, these games are about assessing talent. How did the team play out on the ice? There were a lot of great things, and ultimately the Capitals could have walked away from this with a victory. It's just, some misplays here and there, and maybe Stevenson wasn't quite as dialed in as he should have been in any event. things were learned and film footage is out there for the Capitals to learn from. What they need to work on was penalty problems. Early in the games, the Caps struggled considerably to get out of their own way. The group accumulated 3 penalties in the first period alone, finishing with 5. You are not going to win games sitting in the penalty box. Does it happen on occasion? Sure, but you don't need to be shooting yourself in the foot if you're going to try to win games. And again, this is a game where they're just trying to see how these new systems work. But one of the things that I know for sure, is that you're not going to do that by committing penalties. And I understand that penalties are a part of the game. However, you should try to limit them. There's certainly a lot of things that we need to clean up, but that is to be expected in the first preseason game. Penalties were plentiful in the early going. The Caps had to kill off consecutive Buffalo power plays before the first televised timeout, and they were tasked with three full 2-minute kills in the first half of the first frame. Washington was whistled for 5 minor penalties in the game, and 3 of those infractions took place in the offensive zone, and the Buffalo Sabres made them pay. However, Hunter Shepard, if not for him, I would say that the Capitals would have lost this game by a larger margin, as he stood tall, even under pressure, even in power play situations. So, a tip of the hat goes to Hunter Shepard, proving what he's worth. Oftentimes, you can say this player's good or that player's bad. And in that situation, he was put to the test and stood tall. And there's already some positivity and some good check marks that go next to Hunter Shepard's name, as he was one of the players that really stood out. Again, this was one of these preseason games. And here, let me tell you, if you're not in the DC market, it is sometimes difficult to find these games. I know that it was on the NHL network, but then sometimes it was on the alternate channel. I'm so much looking forward to being able to watch it during the regular season, where I'm not going to have to look at these different sources to find the game. I was able to find the game, but it is a bit worrisome when you're trying to watch the game and you're like, oh shoot, where is it at? But just that to wrap up this show here, talking about how the Capitals did. There were some positive things to take from this. Obviously, Sonny Milano was really great. Obviously, Hunter Shepard was really great. There was causes of concern. The Trevor van Riemsdyk potential injury. What does that mean for the Capitals going forward? So that is what I took from this game, is just building blocks, and who ultimately is going to be playing out in the second game Thursday against the Red Wings, and see how that group does. And then I think ultimately what it's going to be about is just taking who played well with that group, and the next game who played well with that group, and then maybe mixing it up a little bit and getting ready for the regular season. There are not a lot of preseason games to get ready. So the Capitals have some tough decisions to make here. The coaches have some tough decisions to make on who's going to be here, who's going to go, who is going to crack the roster. Again, I do believe that this is going to be the year for Connor McMichael. How is he going to do in the preseason? That's what we're going to have to find out. I do believe that this is going to be the year for Ivan Miroshnichenko as well. Is he going to break camp? I'm not going to count him out, but I do think he will be on the big team at some point this season. So those are 2 of the players that I've really circled and focusing my attention on to see how they perform. I know that Brian McClellan said that, Beck Malenstein's going to be here, and Alexei Protas is going to be here, and maybe Hendrik Slop here. And I'm going to here to tell you here right now, it's not going to happen. All of those players are not going to have a spot on this roster. A majority of them might, but also it's going to depend on how they fare in these preseason games. How do they progress at camp? Those kind of things. As we've seen, Anthony Mantha has kind of bounced around groups a little bit again, but I'm really pulling for Anthony. I think that he's come into this camp with the right mindset. He dropped about 10 pounds, hired the mental coach, seems to be dialed in mentally. All things good going forward. It's going to be interesting to see game number 2, how this team does. It's going to be, I don't know what kind of Red Wings team they have this year. It seems like, I remember years ago when they were a dynasty and won all kinds of cups and all that, kind of had a bit of a fall from grace here recently. But in any event, it's going to be interesting, and positivity. I'm going to take some positive mostly from this game. The only negativity that I'm going to take from this game, there's 2 things: penalties and the potential TVR injury. Those are the things that have me concerned. Everything else, I'm not too concerned about. And if anything, I'm taking more positive than I am negative. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals. And are you a fan of other GC sports? Well, Locked On has got you covered. We have Locked On Commanders, Nationals, and Wizards. So no matter what major DC sport it is, Locked On has got you covered. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.